Stepping through the front door of my folks' house that afternoon, I had no inkling I'd hear my name spoken like some shameful secret. I'd swung by without calling first, my arms loaded with market bags, thinking I'd treat them to their preferred casserole for supper, the kind Mom used to whip up when I was a youngster. But the moment I stepped inside, I froze, catching their voices drifting from the sitting room. "Honestly, I don't know how much longer we can keep up this act," my dad mumbled, his tone hushed. "Jamie is a sorry letdown. Sure, she covers the costs, but that doesn't excuse her falling short in every other aspect." My heart seized up. I nearly let the market bags tumble right there. I could hear the soft chink of cups as my mom responded, completely composed. "Well, at least her funding keeps us living easy. She understands she's indebted to us for everything we've done for her. It's the least she could manage." It felt like all the breath had been knocked out of me. I just stood there, motionless, staring at the passage wall as if it might somehow reveal why my folks, the very individuals I had striven so hard to support, were ripping me to shreds when I wasn't around. Each phrase felt like a knife thrust, reopening old wounds I was sure had long since mended. I had always known they weren't the most warm or encouraging parents. Any success I had achieved never seemed sufficient. No promotion was ever remarkable enough. No gesture generous enough. But this wasn't just fault-finding. This was utter scorn. Slowly, carefully, I backed out the entrance, making sure I didn't make a sound. The market bags were still out in my auto, forgotten. I drove back to my place in quiet, my thoughts swirling with fragments of their conversation. Sorry letdown. At least her funding keeps us living easy. Those phrases echoed like a cruel refrain. I couldn't shake them. For the last almost 4 years, I had quietly taken care of almost every expense. Their house loan, the services, even their trips away. After my dad's building firm failed and my mom retired early due to strain, I stepped up. I was just over 25 when I accepted the responsibility, advancing my way up as a manager at a software company, putting in extra hours, living frugally, so my folks could hold on to the home I grew up in, enjoy restaurant meals, and never stress about payments. They had no clue how much I sacrificed. And still, there they were, seated in the residence I paid for, mocking me. That evening, I sat on my lounge, looking at the money sheet I updated without fail. Every dollar spent, every commitment met. I scrolled through the figures, and for the first time, I didn't feel a sense of accomplishment. I felt like an idiot. I kept going over the scene in my head, hoping maybe I had misunderstood. Perhaps they were discussing someone else. Perhaps it was taken out of context. Perhaps it wasn't as terrible as it sounded. But I knew better. Deep down, I had always sensed their backing was conditional. They only saw value in me when I was handing over funds. This wasn't a misinterpretation. It was the genuine reality surfacing. The next morning, I woke up wishing it had all been a bad dream, but the heaviness in my chest told a different story. I spent the entire day at work struggling to concentrate, fighting the urge to just drive back to their abode and demand answers. By the time I reached my place, I had decided. I needed clarity. I couldn't endure another day pretending things were okay. So I rang them. My dad picked up on the second ring. "Jamie dear," he said. The usual pleasant front in place. I took a shaky inhalation. "Dad, I overheard what you two were saying yesterday," I started, my voice barely stable. "I was present. I heard you both." There was a prolonged quiet on the connection. Then, unbelievably, my mom grabbed the device and chuckled. Not nervously, but genuinely, as if I had just shared a jest. "Well," she said, her voice sharp, "it's accurate, isn't it? You've never measured up to what we anticipated. You owe us everything, Jamie. You understand that." That sealed it. At that precise moment, something inside me altered. Years of guilt, obligation, and unquestioning loyalty dissolved like sweetener in warm liquid. I didn't even end the call. I simply placed the device down on the surface and sat there in silence. The house felt cold or empty. But for once, the silence wasn't unbearable. It was freeing. For the very first time, I recognized what I had to do. The following couple of days passed in a haze. I went through the motions, work, errands, correspondence, but it felt like I was observing someone else live my existence. The only thing that felt genuine was the echo of my mom's laughter and those phrases, "You owe us everything." I couldn't get any rest. I kept replaying every sacrifice I had made since I was just over 25. The times I'd skipped holidays, declined friends, worked 60-hour weeks. Also, my folks could reside comfortably without dreading losing their dwelling. Every birthday present, every meal I paid for them, every service cost quietly covered. I hadn't been assisting out of duty. I did it out of affection. But affection, it seemed, was a one-way route. On the third evening, I found myself scrolling through old electronic notes and messages, reviewing past interactions with them. It wasn't the initial time they had dismissed me, belittled me, or made me feel inadequate. It was merely the initial time I had truly heard it. My mom's passive-aggressive comments about my minor advancement at work. My dad's jests about how at least Robert would have stayed to help with the family trade, even though Robert, my sibling, hadn't spoken to them in years. I had been naive, excusing it all under the guise of, "That's just how they are." But hearing them label me a letdown without realizing I was listening stripped away every illusion. This wasn't merely how they acted. This was how they genuinely felt. By the conclusion of the week, I had made a quiet but firm determination. I was finished. I wasn't going to create a scene or plead for their affection. I wasn't even going to confront them again. They had demonstrated who they were, and this time I accepted it. I opened my finance planning application and canceled every automatic payment linked to their records. House loan services, plastic funds, even the prepaid mobile service plan I had been quietly covering since Dad's enterprise folded. I stared at the display screen as the confirmation notes rolled in. It felt both terrifying and liberating. For the first time in almost 4 years, I wasn't their cash machine. I was simply myself. That evening, I contacted my closest friend, Sarah. She had always cautioned me that my folks took advantage of me, but I had stubbornly defended them. When I related what transpired, she didn't utter, "I told you so." She simply listened, then said softly, "Jamie, you don't have to keep funding individuals who don't even acknowledge you." I wept harder than I had in years. The next morning, as if the cosmos could sense the change, I received a message from my mom. "Dearie, we've noticed a few things aren't processing this month. Did you switch institutions? Ring me when you get a moment." No apology, no recognition of what they said. Just things as usual. I didn't reply. A few hours later, Dad attempted contact. "Hey Jamie, your mom's uneasy. Some payments are missing. Can you check?" Still no apology. Just worry about their precious payments. I allowed the note to remain there unread. The quiet on my end seemed to unsettle them. Over the next few days, I got more messages, recorded voices, and even an electronic note from my dad, the man who detested modern systems, titled, "Urgent, please reply." Each note grew slightly more frantic. "Jamie, we're merely uneasy about you. Did you forget the house loan? We know you're occupied with work. Kindly don't be stubborn. We need to converse." I wasn't being stubborn. I was becoming liberated. When the weekend arrived, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took the whole day just for myself. No errands, no work correspondence, no family obligations. I went to the park, brought a novel I hadn't found time to read, and simply existed. It felt strange initially, like I was neglecting something crucial. But gradually, it began to feel correct. The messages didn't cease, however. That evening, as I sat by the water observing the sunset, I got another note from Mom. This time it read, "Ring us when possible." We didn't mean it. I gazed at those phrases for a considerable time. We didn't mean it. Did they believe this was merely about language? That I could erase hearing them label me a failure? That I could forget the years of dismissiveness, the sense of entitlement, the conditional affection? They hadn't just made a slip in the heat of the moment. They said those things when they thought I wasn't listening. When they were relaxed, truthful, unfiltered. I closed my device without responding. They meant every single phrase they uttered. And now so did I. I expected the quiet would bring me remorse. I anticipated the sleepless nights, the urge to apologize even when I knew I had done nothing wrong. That was the habit I had fallen into for years. They would pressure, I would yield, they would wound me, and I would find a way to forgive them simply to maintain harmony. But the quiet didn't bring remorse. It brought relief. Days turned into a week, and still, I didn't reply. I ignored every message, call, and recorded voice. I observed as their manner shifted from concerned to annoyed, and eventually to frantic. By the second week, my mother's messages were sounding more desperate. "Jamie, why aren't you answering? Your father and I are incredibly worried. We've been good to you. Don't abandon your connections over one silly misunderstanding. The house loan is late and the institution is calling. Please, dearie." There it was. The actual motivation behind their unease. Not me, not my well-being, but the house loan, the funds. Every time I saw their messages, I could almost hear their voices as they sat comfortably in the dwelling I paid for, still believing they were entitled to everything I had built. Still pretending that the language they used meant nothing. Still thinking that tossing around the term connections would automatically grant them absolution. But I didn't feel inclined to forgive. I felt deceived. Sarah invited me over that weekend evening. She prepared tea, knowing I hadn't been getting much rest. We sat on her sofa surrounded by soft lights and calming sounds, a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. "I don't know how to articulate it," I admitted, holding the warm container in both hands. "It's like I'm mourning them, but they're still living." Sarah nodded, understanding immediately. "You are? You're mourning the folks you thought you had or wished they could be." I fought back tears. She was correct. I had spent years hoping they would change. That the next instance I helped them, the next instance I sacrificed, it would finally be enough to make them proud. But it never was. And it never would be. "They said it so effortlessly, Sarah," I whispered, like it wasn't even the initial time, like they'd been saying it all along when I wasn't around. "You deserve better," she stated firmly. "And you understand that." I did. And the odd thing was, recognizing it didn't ache as much as I thought it would. It felt necessary. The next day, I checked my electronic notes and found one that made my insides clench. Final notification. House loan payment past due. Immediate action required. I stared at it, realizing that for the first time in years, my folks were confronting the results of their own selections, and I wasn't rushing in to rescue them. An hour later, another recorded voice arrived from my dad. His voice was sharp now, no longer pretending. "Jamie, I don't know what this little act is about, but you need to move past whatever foolishness you've imagined. Your mother and I are under immense strain. You're complicating things unnecessarily. Ring us." I couldn't help but chuckle. After everything, I was the one causing strain. Later that evening, my mother called again. This time she didn't even bother concealing her exasperation. "We brought you up better than this," she snapped, ignoring us, letting the house loan lapse. "We didn't mean what we said. You know how your father gets when he's annoyed. And I was just being humorous. Stop being so overly sensitive and ring us back." Overly sensitive. The word struck harder than I anticipated. They had always used it to dismiss me. Every wounded emotion, every limit I attempted to establish was labeled as me being too sensitive. But I wasn't sensitive. I was done. I closed my eyes and envisioned them seated in the sitting room, panicking as they received calls from the institution. I could almost hear my father blaming my mother blaming me, both too arrogant to admit the truth, that without me they couldn't afford the existence they'd constructed. And I was okay with that. That evening, for the first time in a lengthy while, I slept soundly. On the weekend, Sarah and I went for morning food. As we sat on the outdoor area observing folks pass by, my device vibrated again. Another note from my mother. "Jamie, we didn't mean it. Please, just ring us. We require you." But this time, there was something different about it. It wasn't merely desperation. It was apprehension. And somehow that didn't bother me. It almost felt just. Sarah noticed me gazing at my device. "Are you planning to answer them?" I shook my head. Not yet. Because deep down, I knew this was merely the inception. By the conclusion of the second month, the quiet was no longer something I dreaded. It was something I possessed. My folks, on the other hand, were falling apart. I could perceive it in the frequency of their calls, the increasingly frantic recorded voices, the passive-aggressive electronic notes that accumulated like unwanted promotional material. They couldn't grasp why I wasn't rushing in to rescue them as I always had. Why wasn't their good little girl stepping up to mend the fissures they had long pretended didn't exist? They weren't accustomed to this version of me, the version that didn't yield. Sarah noticed it too. "You appear lighter," she remarked one evening as we strolled through the park, fallen foliage crunching beneath our footwear. "Like you're finally taking in air." I conceded. For the very first time, I don't feel like I'm indebted to anyone for anything. Still, a portion of me wondered when the real distress would commence. The house loan wasn't merely past due. It was on the verge of being taken. The institution had likely already initiated the procedure, and knowing my folks, they'd been ignoring the calls until it became unavoidable. That unavoidability arrived the next day. My device rang while I was at my workplace. I disregarded it as I had every call from them recently. But when I checked the recorded voice later, my father's tone sounded different. Tense, desperate. "Jamie, please. The institution. We're losing the dwelling. They've commenced the takeover steps. We didn't mean what we said. We were merely upset. It wasn't about you. Please, just ring us." I stared at the display, unaffected. It was about me. It had always been about me. About their letdown that I wasn't who they desired me to be, about their sense of entitlement to everything I had worked for. The fact that they only connected now, when they were financially sinking, revealed everything I needed to comprehend. Later that evening, as I scrolled mindlessly through online channels, I received another message. This time from an unidentified contact. "Hello, it's Aunt Brenda. Your mom is a state, Jamie. Just ring her. Connections. Relatives stick together." My jaw tensed. That line, about relatives sticking together, had been used like a weapon against me my whole existence. But family, I understood then, didn't mean allowing bad behavior. It didn't mean sacrificing yourself so others could flourish while simultaneously calling you a disappointment. I gave no reply. Several sunrises and sunsets passed. More extended relatives began contacting me. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had strong opinions about how I should forgive and move past things. Each one presented their arguments, yet not one of them knew the complete situation. They hadn't heard the precise words spoken to me. They hadn't sat by themselves on their sofa hearing their parents label them as nothing more than a source of funds with emotions. When I still didn't respond, the effort to make me feel guilty turned into threats. It began subtly. My dad emailed me a link to a local news report about the difficulties people over 65 faced finding reasonably priced housing, with the words, "Is this genuinely what you wish for your parents?" underlined. Then my mom escalated it further. "If you refuse to help us, others will find out. Your friends, your supervisor. Do you want them to know how selfish you are after all we've sacrificed for you?" A cold sensation crept up my spine. I hadn't anticipated them going that far, threatening my reputation. Still, deep down, I wasn't surprised. This revealed their true nature. When the pretense finally dropped, I forwarded the email to Chloe without adding anything. She rang me right away. "Harper, you must protect yourself. Don't let them twist things around." "I won't," I stated, my voice steady. "Not this particular occasion." I accessed my work files and started compiling everything I needed. Pay slips, electronic messages, even performance evaluations. I wasn't naive. If they were willing to slander me to family, they might attempt to reach further. I wasn't going to let them. By the end of the week, another message arrived from my mom, this time sounding less like a warning and more like a request. "We didn't intend it, Harper. We were stressed. It was a difficult day. Please don't let this ruin everything. You're our offspring. You're supposed to support us." But their speech no longer affected me. The harm was irreparable, not only from what they uttered on that specific day, but with every small dismissal, every assumption that I would finance their lives, every attempt to make me feel guilty, and every moment I had spent believing I was the root of the issue. They could phrase it however they wished now. But the simple truth was this. I was no longer their safety net. And whether they wanted to acknowledge it or not, they were about to fall. The final collapse occurred more swiftly than I had foreseen. Around a week after their last desperate voice message, I got a phone call from Aunt Diane again. This time, she sounded distressed. "Harper, they are losing their dwelling. They only have approximately 4 weeks left before it's sold off. Your father is in utter despair, And your mother, she's crying. Please, you absolutely must intervene. I listened quietly, gazing at the ceiling as I rested on my sofa. The person I was months ago would have been pacing the room, heart pounding, frantically trying to find a way to save them. But now I felt detached. Sad, certainly, but also resolute. I had already intervened. For years, I had rescued them from this precise situation more times than I could count. Yet instead of receiving appreciation, I was met with scorn. Aunt Diane, I responded carefully, I regret this, but I am not getting involved. There was a silence on the other end, followed by a sharp gasp for air. Harper, they remain your parents. They made mistakes, undoubtedly, but blood is thicker than water. I understand, I replied, and that's precisely why I gave them far more than I ever should have. But I cannot continue sacrificing myself for individuals who only show affection when it suits them. Before she could respond, I ended the conversation. I wasn't prepared to hear the familiar refrain of, "But they're your family," any longer. I had listened to that tune too many times. Over the subsequent couple of days, the circumstance worsened significantly. I started receiving electronic mail directly from the financial institution, likely because I was still listed as a previous point of contact. The residence was officially undergoing repossession. Notices had been placed on the property. I pictured my mom and dad shocked to discover the familiar red-lettered paperwork attached to their main entrance. A part of me felt a sense of guilt, but guilt had been my automatic response for too long. Instead, I reminded myself of the countless instances I had pulled them back from the brink, only to be repaid with mockery behind my back. They hadn't merely made an error. They had revealed their authentic selves to me. Then came the communication that made my stomach turn over. Harper, my dad typed in a cold, abrupt email. If you do not rectify this, you will experience regret. You are indebted to us. We are your parents, and you are not permitted to abandon us in this manner. Recall who financed your academic pursuits. Recall who brought you up. I stared at the display, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer brazenness. They did not pay for my academic pursuits. I had worked 2 part-time jobs, acquired student loans, and when my parents' payments failed during my 3rd year of university, I covered the shortfall myself. I had never even requested that they reimburse me. I scrolled through my stored electronic messages and located the payment confirmations, verification of every small amount I had pieced together to remain enrolled. I sat there in astonished quiet, realizing just how profoundly they had rewritten the narrative to match their perspective. They never provided funding for me. They never genuinely supported me. The following day, the definitive breaking point arrived. A voice message left by my mom, her speech wavering between weeping and fury. I genuinely hope you are content, Harper. We are going to lose absolutely everything. The house, the automobiles, everything is collapsing. Is that truly what you desired? For your parents to become homeless? You are pathetic. Exactly as we always characterized you. The utterances struck me like a physical blow. Not because they were novel, but because they were familiar. This wasn't new conduct. This was merely the first instance I wasn't adequately dulling my senses to disregard it. They were not remorseful for their words. They were remorseful for the outcomes. I played the voice message for Chloe that evening, quiet tears tracing paths down my cheeks. You do not deserve this, she whispered. This is not affection, Harper. This is manipulation. I nodded. I knew she was correct. And despite the pain, the final element of my choice solidified. I would not rescue them. I wasn't merely withdrawing my money. I was finished being their scapegoat. 2 days passed, and another email arrived, brief and frantic. Please, Harper, we did not mean it. Simply assist us this singular final occasion. We are pleading with you. I gazed at the communication for a considerable duration, but I did not respond. Instead, I quietly started making arrangements for something I should have done ages ago, shielding myself legally and emotionally. Because whether they recognized it or not, their safety net had officially vanished, and this time they were going to hit the ground. The day the house officially entered repossession, there was no celebration, no dramatic confrontation, no heartfelt apology, just a sterile notification email from the financial institution stating the inevitable outcome. The property would be sold off within 4 weeks, unless the outstanding debt was settled in full. I understood they could not pay it without my involvement. They were exposed to reality, the reality I had been protecting them from for numerous years. I imagined I would experience some measure of satisfaction watching everything unravel. But the truth was, it wasn't satisfying. It was simply silent. A quietude I hadn't known since my childhood years. For once, I wasn't frantically resolving someone else's difficulties. A few days afterwards, Chloe and I went out for coffee. She slid a large envelope across the table. "I consulted with a legal expert, as you requested," she stated. "Everything is prepared. If they attempt anything, smear your name, show up at your place of work, or harass you, you have protection." I nodded, staring at the folder without opening it. The heaviness in my chest remained, but it felt different now. It was no longer fear or guilt. It was simply the weight of progressing forward. I finally spoke it aloud. "They are going to lose the dwelling." Chloe did not react. They made this choice. And deep within, I knew that was accurate. The subsequent phone call arrived the following weekend. This instance, it was my dad, and his tone was unrecognizable, strained, broken. Nothing like the imposing figure I had grown up knowing. "Harper, please do not do this. We did not mean it. You understand, we did not mean it. We were upset. We were stressed. But we require your help. We require your help." For a fleeting second, I nearly answered. The part of me that still desired their approval. The child within me who longed for her parents to finally demonstrate the affection she had always wished for almost picked up that device. But I did not, because I finally grasped the reality. They hadn't reached out to offer an apology after causing me pain. They reached out when the monetary support ceased. They did not require me. They required what I provided them. I spent the remainder of the day packing away old collections of family pictures, greetings, small mementos, items I had kept out of some feeling of obligation. But as I placed them into a pile for donation, I recognized something significant. All these years, I believed severing connections with them would leave me feeling empty. Instead, I felt lighter with each container I sealed shut. 2 weeks later, the dwelling was officially listed for sale by auction. Information spread quickly. Relatives I hadn't communicated with in ages flooded my mobile device. "How could you abandon your parents in this way? They made immense sacrifices for you. This is unforgivable." Every communication attempted to drag me back into the role I had consistently performed: the mediator, the problem solver, the dutiful daughter who attended to everyone except herself. But I did not falter. Not on this occasion. The genuine turning point arrived when my mom herself appeared at my workplace premises. I observed her from the safety of the security surveillance monitors as she begged the receptionist to permit her access upstairs. When security staff escorted her out, she looked around frantically as if searching for someone to halt the situation. It wasn't me. Later that afternoon, I discovered a message written by hand affixed to the windscreen of my vehicle. "Please, Harper, we can rectify this. Do not do this to your family." I folded the note with care and discarded it in the waste receptacle. On the night before the auction event, I sat on the floor of my living space, sipping hot beverage, staring at the city illumination beyond my viewing pane. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel cruel. I simply felt unburdened. Chloe telephoned. "They are still attempting to contact you," she stated gently. "Are you all right?" "I am," I responded. And for the very first time, I truly meant it. The dwelling sold the following morning to a youthful pair who seemed ecstatic as they held the access keys. I watched the announcement online, understanding that particular chapter of my existence had concluded. My mom and dad relocated into a small rented flat situated on the opposite side of the metropolitan area. I was unaware of the particulars. I did not inquire. I only knew the limited information I acquired through other individuals. And I had no need to know more because this was not about seeking retribution. It was about finally selecting myself. A few months later, standing in my quiet living space, surrounded by my own furnishings, my own tranquility, and my own guidelines, I came to a realization. I had not lost my family members. They had lost me. And curiously enough, that represented the most empowering action I had ever undertaken. Occasionally, Withdrawing isn't intended as a form of penalty. It is about ensuring one's survival. And I had indeed survived.